I will literally end the filibuster by specifically utilizing it to talk at length about the entirety of the Sonic the Hedgehog lore. All right, let's go ahead and talk about what just happened in the Senate in the United States. A vote was put in not to codify Roe v. Wade. That is something functionally different. But to legalize abortion federally, irrespective of Roe v. Wade. We'll be talking about that here in a second, but first we need to go ahead and get into the fan art section. First, we have one from Lunar Muse Serenity, new outfit drop. This one looks like I am a starting character in a Final Fantasy game, I'm not gonna lie. Yes or no on turtleneck, not 100% certain for that, but definitely looks like that to me. The next one we have is from Terrelin. The minor mishap in making the Vosh video made me think of this. A scene from Hermitcraft, but with Suris in Scar's place. You didn't see anything. I also didn't say anything about this video killing my career. Very fair. My stream never has technical difficulties. What are you talking about? I've never had any whatsoever. So that looks like a Lara Croft Suris. It could be. Fenga Kagami, thank you very much for reading me your points for an owl. Owl. The last one we have here is from Big Blue. Said, made this with love and blood, but mostly blood. Hope you like it. Honestly, I really, really do. If I'm going to be honest, I think the outfit that has received the most, like, really cute variations in the fan art section has probably been the Autumn outfit by Remixin. Hands down. Knight098765, thank you very much for the follow. Something about that outfit just encourages people to make really cute art of it. I don't know why, but I appreciate it. As always, everybody, thank you all for your fan art submissions. If you want your fan art shown in a future video, the best way to do so is to drop it into the fan art section of the Discord. With all that said, let's go ahead and get right into the discussion. So, if we're looking at Politico here, 6 hours ago, there's two stories we're going to be looking at here on Politico. The first one here is from 6 hours ago. House Democrats marched across the Capitol to the opposite chamber as the Senate prepared to take a vote on abortion protections. Abortion action chanting "My Body, My Decision" in the hallways around the Senate chamber. A group of roughly 24 House Democrats marched over to the upper chamber ahead of Wednesday's abortion vote. The protest generated a substantial police response, with officers rushing around the Senate chamber to respond. Let's take a look at that. My body, my decision. My body, my decision. Why does that require a police response? Why does that require a police response? Another several dozen House Democrats lined the perimeter of the chamber as the debate on the legislation started coming to a close. Even more members watched from the balcony. Schumer and other Democrats went over to greet the House members following the end of the debate, who left soon after. The vote itself proceeded normally. Senators came one by one to the desk to indicate their vote. Hardly any, except Senate Help Chair Patty Murray, Democrat from Washington, remained in the chamber throughout the vote. The last person to vote was Senator Joe Manchin, who made opposition to the bill bipartisan. He was the Democrat who opposed the bill. When he arrived shortly after 4:20 p.m. Vice President Kamala Harris finally announced the final tally of 49 votes for and 51 votes against. So, we're going to continue the story here in a second, but I just want it to be noted, over on Twitter, you're probably going to see a lot of stuff on Joe Manchin right now. As it stands, pretty much everybody unilaterally is just calling him a Republican in Democrats' clothing. I don't know if I would necessarily say those words. I would just say he's a conservative Democrat. If that's a distinction without a difference to you, more power to you. I also have another thing that I could call him in this particular scenario, and that's a piece of garbage. That's another one. That one I will not be taking deliberation on, personally. So Manchin votes red 60+% of the time. Yep. What the protesters wanted. Some House Democrats have called on the Senate to either end or amend the filibuster to pass abortion rights legislation, despite the legislation today expected to fail to garner even a simple Senate majority. Wednesday's abortion vote is more symbolic, as Democrats want to make it a midterm issue. This is going to be an animating decision for people across the country if the Supreme Court actually takes this radical step, said Representative Pramila Jayapal, a Democrat from Washington as well. House lawmakers are allowed to go on the Senate floor. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the more recent story on this. That was from 6 hours ago. Here's one from 4 hours ago. The Senate's two pro-abortion rights Republicans are still talking to Democrats about a bipartisan way to turn Roe v. Wade into law. Let's take a look at this part of the story. So we know the Senate vote failed, right? After the Senate vote failed, as expected, to advance a broad abortion rights bill on Wednesday, Senator Susan Collins, who's a Republican from Maine, said she's still working with Senator Tim Kaine, a Democrat from Virginia, and other senators on a new proposal that would codify two major abortion decisions by the Supreme Court into law. Collins told reporters the group is trying to come up with a more focused bill that will accomplish the goal of ensuring that if the Supreme Court does rule to overturn Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey, that there would be no change in a woman's right to choose. So there's at least that, but the question generally comes down to asking, why would that be necessary if the people who cared about the vote just voted on the first bill? What was the issue with the first bill when it came to abortion rights? Said he's a dino and Turok isn't here. Like, if you want to actually codify people's rights to their own bodily autonomy, then voting on the bill that lets you have those rights, probably a good idea, probably a good first step. That's, that would be my thought. What about the Murkowski bill? So Collins has her own narrow codify Roe measure and co-championed by Senator Lisa Murkowski, one that Democratic leaders have stiff-armed, despite some members of their caucus being interested in at least a discussion about a compromise effort that could get as many as 52 Senate votes. But Collins noted that she's now working on what she's now working on would be a more specific bill than her plan with Murkowski. So again, here's the thing. If Murkowski voted no on this bill, what deludes people into thinking that she's going to vote yes on another one, on some other random-ass technicality? I understand somebody going, oh, look, no, I'm one of the good Republicans. I think that, yes, bodily autonomy good, and also conservative values, broadly speaking, vague. We have the Senate, guys. We have the Senate. The Democrats have the Senate. And somehow we couldn't get this through. You can put a lot of it on Manchin, and I'm willing to put most of this on Manchin, but we fucking have the Senate. We control every wing of the government right now. And yet somehow the Democrats are inept enough to not be able to get this shit passed right now. Okay. Here's truly number one pony. Remember, Republicans think that it's okay when MAGA QAnon supporters threaten Democrat congressmen, but it's not okay when progressive protests at a Supreme Court member's house. Yup. So we just had to have a dino or two. Yep. Going further here. Democrats have largely dismissed Collins and Murkowski's legislation as too weak to protect abortion rights if Roe fails, as is likely as soon as next month. Many in the Majority Leader Chuck Schumer's caucus also argue that if the bill can't clear a GOP filibuster anyway, then there's no point in voting on narrower versions of it, of the one that was defeated on Wednesday. But now the 2016 vice president nominee Kaine told Politico that his colleague's argument doesn't hold water with him. They said, then why are they doing one today, he quipped, referring to the Democratic leadership calling up a bill they knew was likely to fail. Kaine added that he thinks a vote on a future abortion compromise could make a difference even if it fails to pass, and could potentially shape future rulings from the Supreme Court on the issue. Says, I think we might have some it might have some value to the court that's still grappling with these questions to know that not only 70+% of the American public supports Roe v. Wade, but a bipartisan majority of the Senate does as well. Well, here's the thing. If a bipartisan majority of the Senate supports Roe, but they are constantly failing to codify Roe, that stopped mattering. That stopped mattering at that point. You can also make the argument that there was bipartisan against it thanks to Manchin. Like, we got to talk about him still, right? So that's what it sounds like. Why vote Democrat when they won't do anything? The Republicans being worse is going to be less of a reason to vote for them. But see, here's the thing, Trash Cat Lionel. You run into a catch-22. At least here in the States. The catch-22 is this. If you don't vote, then you are not exercising what little of a say you have in American politics. If you do vote and you vote for a party that is guaranteed to lose, and it's mathematically they are guaranteed to lose in most cases. Like, this is CCP Grey did a very good video breaking down the issues with the way we do our voting system. Because votes are tallied the way they are in the United States, mathematically you always end up with two dominant parties. There's no way you don't. So, if you have the choice to vote or not to vote, not voting probably guarantees Republicans in. Voting, we know that there are more people who are going to vote blue in the United States in general. It's just a matter of getting them to the polls to actually fucking vote. We know that we get more Democrats in when people actually go out and vote. The more people who vote, the more votes end up going Democrat. This is one of the reasons why we have people like Kemp who try to make it harder to vote in states. The harder it is to vote in a state, the fewer people vote Democrat. That could say something about Democratic voters being lazier, but who knows? If your choice is two evils and you can only choose the lesser of two evils, you have to choose the lesser of the two evils. Now, that doesn't mean you just put your vote in and then leave. You don't do that. If you put in your vote, you then hold the people who actually represent you as accountable as you can. You do this by calling your representatives. You do this by getting involved in your own city's local politics. There's a variety of ways that you can influence the decisions of the people who you've elected into office. And here's the thing. If you don't write to them, if you don't protest, if you don't do things like exercise your First Amendment right to help shape those decisions, guess what? The other side is already doing that. They're always doing that. They will always, 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 always be doing the things you should be doing. So when you choose not to protest, when you choose not to speak up, when you choose not to vote, the other side is already doing that. They get to win because of your apathy. Now, there is another argument to be made, though. There is an argument that gets made here generally about if Democrats are not doing X, Y, and Z, why vote for them? It's only, what's the way it's usually worded? Democrats basically get to hold your vote hostage. That is entirely valid. They are. There is not an argument to say the Democrats do not hold your vote hostage. That is a thing they definitely do. But it also has to be noted that that only matters if the only thing you're doing is voting. If the only way that you are involving yourself in your politics is by just voting. If you are not doing things like, say, using a platform to influence other people on important policy decisions, if you are not going and talking to representatives when they have events in your local area, if your only votes are going to the presidential nominations and not things that are happening in your local area as well, that might be one of the reasons why your vote feels as small and insignificant as it does. There are other aspects to being involved in a republic like we're in right now that extend far beyond just putting your vote in a ballot box. Protesting helps. Protesting works. That's the thing, though. While society does tend to move towards progressivism on the whole, it's always in small bits because it's always a fight. And resting on your laurels, it doesn't help. I'm not accusing people in my chat or people who are watching this video when it goes up of not doing enough politically, and that's the reason things are fucked up. But I will say that if you have the opportunity to do more politically and influence things in a positive way, apathy is not a good argument for not doing it. It's not. And also, accepting that maybe some of the things that you think need to happen politically might not actually happen in your lifetime. But that doesn't make it invalid. Sometimes fighting to make things better for future generations is the only option you have. But it's also not the worst option because it still trends to make things better. Making sure to vote in primaries. Yeah, vote in fucking primaries. Don't just vote when the presidential election comes up. Also vote in your local elections. Also vote in primaries. If you're in Georgia, they are happening on the 24th. When that option comes up, you don't just vote for your president. You vote for everything else. It all affects you. All of it. The only reason that politicians are able to get trigger laws set up is because from the ground up, local politicians and pundits get power. You vote in smaller elections. Hell, I think I voted on the local stuff not too long ago. There you go. And Chris says, Marietta voter here. Absolutely doing my part. There you go. But there's more to talk about than just that. There's more we have to go over than just that conversation. Because here's the thing. We also need to talk a little bit about Manchin. Because this is not the first time that Manchin has thrown off important votes. So, this article is titled How Joe Manchin Knifed the Democrats and Bailed on Saving Democracy. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. Giddy is not a word people use to describe Jon Tester. The towering senior United States senator from Montana is blunt and pragmatic. In the halls of Congress, he's one of the last surviving rural Democrats. When he's not in Washington, D.C., Tester runs a dirt farm in Montana that's been in his family for 3 generations. A dirt farming rural Democrat knows better than to overhype. So it came as a surprise one day this winter when Tester showed up visibly excited to the office of his friend Michael Bennet, one of Colorado's 2 Democratic senators, to share tantalizing pieces of information. He said, "I think we're going to get this voting right things done," he said to Bennet. Tester said that Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, a critical swing vote on sweeping voting rights reforms, has signaled his support for a bill, and more crucially, the parliamentary rules change needed to bypass a Republican filibuster of the bill. For the previous 6 months, Tester and two of his colleagues, Tim Kaine of Virginia and Angus King of Maine, had lobbied Manchin on voting rights and the fate of the filibuster. On weekends and holidays, on conference calls, and huddled in one another's hideaways in the bowels of the Capitol, Kaine, King, and Tester had urged Manchin to support his party's proposal for overhauling the country's voting laws. They needed him, with Senate Democrats holding onto the barest majority possible, 50 votes, with Vice President Kamala Harris acting as the tiebreaker. Not a single Republican had said that they would support voting the bill, which left Democrats with only one path to change the filibuster, the procedural tactic that requires a 60-vote majority to advance the most types of legislation. Manchin had remained steadfast in his opposition to the plan, arguing that the filibuster protected small states like his and forced lawmakers to seek bipartisan compromise. Yet, during months of conversations with Kaine, King, and Tester, Manchin had increasingly lamented the dysfunction of the Senate. He wanted, as he put it, some good rule changes to make the place work better. By early January, Manchin had given the impression, at least according to his colleagues, that he was ready to amend the filibuster in a way that would open a path to passing voting rights. At the end of one of their calls, Tester recalls saying that with everyone in agreement on a filibuster deal, all they had to do was put the finishing touches on the voting legislation itself, and they were ready to proceed. A yes vote from Manchin could not have been more critical for free and fair elections. The Republican Party responded to Joe Biden's victory with a backlash on the right to vote. Last year, the GOP-run legislatures passed 34 laws in at least 19 states that limited access to voting, put partisan operatives in charge of running elections, and made it harder to participate in American democracy. At the same time, a belief that the last election was somehow stolen or fraudulent, the so-called big lie, had become an article of faith for many Republicans. So we've seen all of this from like the QAnoners already, right? We've seen all of that already. That's even freaking, what's his name? In Florida, DeSantis. If memory serves, didn't he put up legislation recently that made it to where he was able to put his own like police force outside of voting stations to verify everything? Kind of fucked up, right? Kind of more than a little fucked up. But let's go ahead and continue. In response to this onslaught, Democrats in Congress introduced multiple pieces of legislation and vowed to pass bills in time for the 2022 midterms. In public, Democratic leaders spoke in existential terms about the need for reform. Failure is not an option, Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said. In private, lawmakers and activists predicted victory, arguing that the importance of the issue would overcome the challenge of unifying a 50-member caucus. They were wrong. Rolling Stone interviewed more than 30 key figures inside and outside of Congress to understand how the most ambitious voting rights bill in generations and the Democratic Party's main policy response to January 6 ended in failure. The blame for this defeat lies with multiple parties. Manchin either strung along his party for months with no intention of actually supporting the reforms, or gave indication that his colleagues said he was on board, only to reverse his position on multiple occasions. Senate Democrats, meanwhile, miscalculated that if they could flip Manchin, another swing vote, Kristen Sinema of Arizona would follow his lead. As for the White House, these sources say President Biden, despite saying as a candidate that one of the first things I'll do as president is restore the Voting Rights Act, never seemed fully committed to passing voting rights legislation. When Biden had vowed to run an FDR-sized presidency, he did inject himself into the negotiations late into the fight. His contributions did more harm than good. Manchin spokeswoman Sam Runyon says the senator never said he was open to eliminating the filibuster. If his colleagues believed that, she said, they were mistaken. The White House responds by saying just because we didn't get the result we wanted, we can't say the power of the presidency wasn't behind it. Nevertheless, a question lingers: why did Democrat efforts fail? So we know not only when it comes to abortion rights, but also for voting rights, Manchin has a very bad history of, for some reason, siding with Republicans on their legislation ideas. And this creates a bit of a problem. We are in one of the most polarized moments politically in the United States. The divide between Democrats and Republicans is almost an entirely black and white divide in the way that people see their politics in the US. When we have a 50-50 split that relies entirely on vice presidential tiebreakers in the United States Senate, having even one person out of place creates an invitation for things to go awry. You have to have everybody on board with every policy decision, which is almost impossible to do for us somehow. Whereas it seems to have always been an easy thing for Republicans to do. Why is that? Not a topic for this video. And I'm probably not the best person to even analyze that. When you awkwardly need tribalism in order to get something across, one person stepping away from it screws everything up. And in most cases, you don't want tribalism, especially in politics, because that's what causes people to have unsubstantiable beliefs that they will always defend no matter what. But when you're trying to pass legislation, you can't have a random crack in the dam. And that's what we have here. Also note the Senate filibuster is essentially I declare filibuster and nothing else. No need for the filibustering side to even speak. So here, I'll say this. If I ever get elected into the Senate, I will literally end the filibuster by specifically utilizing it to talk at length about the entirety of the Sonic the Hedgehog lore. I will declare filibuster, and then that is what I will do with everyone's time until eventually there will be bipartisan agreement that this has to stop at some point. That said, I don't want to be in an elected office. Feck that. Are you tossing your hat in the ring? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I don't have the money to do that. I don't have the party support to do that, nor would I. Having been openly critical about the failings of the Democratic Party? No. They would not fund me. Just piss on them till they agree with you. Sarah shows up with a briefcase full of Sonic comics. No, I would show up with a briefcase that has Yu-Gi-Oh cards lined up the exact way Kaiba's are in the anime. And I would make the Senate draft, and the winner of the draft gets to have their vote calculated. I would get on the stage and go, so there's this website called Mobius Unleashed. And I just think that the Senate needs to be aware of the existence of this website and its great importance to the history of the Sonic the Hedgehog community. That's what I'll do. That is exactly what I will do. Cue some poor senator looking it up on his phone in the middle of the actual hearing. Man. See, now I really want this to happen. But end result of all this, Joe Manchin seems to constantly vote with Republicans. And as much as I'm against echo chambers and tribalism, when you are trying to get right voting or abortion, rights to people's bodily autonomy, rights for people to participate in democracy, when you need a united front on those votes, he doesn't seem to actually do that. If you guys wanted an update on what was going on with those votes, there you are. As always, though, if you guys have any comments, let me know in the comment section below. Any thoughts on the video? What do you think is going to happen in the future of this debate? Should this even be a debate? In my opinion, it shouldn't be. Your rights pretty much end where my nose begins. So the fact that we have people fighting for the rights to utilize their own bodies in the ways that they see fit is ludicrous to me. But, with all that said, if you want to support the channel and what I do, please check the description below. There's a link to Patreon, as well as links to any campaigns that I happen to be running, on top of links to the merch store. Everything else is down there. With all that said, guys, as always, everybody, thank you for watching, and insert end to video tagline here.